Welcome back. In this video, we will finish that. And what is that? Well, this is our analysis sheet, and this is the last step before we can finally create some charts. The good thing about that sheet is that we now organized the data the way we want it to be. So we have that two tables where we have the statistics by period and by region, or by period and country, and we have that list right here. And this list allows us to select the statistics that should be displayed dynamically. This is good. The bad thing is that at the moment our Excel doesn't look like this, but look like that. So time to create that list and time to learn some more formulas. So the first thing that we should change is that cell D1 right here. As we just saw, this should be a drop-down list that allows us to select the different statistics. Now let's create that drop-down list by selecting cell D1 like I did it right here. Now we go to the data ribbon, to the data tools area, and here we can press that data validation button like this. Now we are in that settings menu, and if we change that validation criteria allow section right there from any value to list, we almost created our drop-down list. The only thing that we have to define is what should be displayed in that drop-down list, or what things can you select in there. For instance, if we go to that source area and type 1, 2, and 3, like this, press OK, then we see that our statistics cell changed. We now have that arrow next to the cell. And if we click that arrow, we can now select 1, 2, 3. So if I select 2, for instance, the cell value changes to that selected value. Now, that's almost what we want. We want a drop-down list like this, but the content or the selection options are not the ones that we want. We want to have something else in here. And what do we want? Well, if we go to the input summary sheet, we see that we have the statistics in column E or in cell E2 until J2. So watch time in minutes until subscribers. And we could now select that criteria in our drop-down list. But I don't want to do it like this. I would like to have that statistics that we want to select in a separate sheet and not in one row, but in one column. This is not necessary. I just want to show you how you can do something like this. That's why we do that now. So the first thing we need is we need a new sheet, which we can create by pressing on the plus. Let's drag it to the left and call it statistics list, because that's what it's going to be. And now if we go back to the input summary sheet, we see that we have a total number of 6 statistics. That's important to know for the formula we will apply right now. Because if we go back to the statistics list sheet right now and select 6 cells, because that's the amount of statistics we have, and now write equals transpose and press tab, we will be able to turn that statistics from a row into a column. Now, this is an array formula in Excel. I'm not going to talk about array formulas in detail right now. But there is one specific thing you have to know if you want to apply the transpose array formula. Actually, 2 things. The first thing is that you have to select the amount of cells that you want to transpose in your final output sheet, so in this sheet at the moment. And that's why I selected that 6 cells and previously checked how many cells we want to transpose. Now that we selected that 6 cells and wrote that transpose formula, we can go to the input summary and select those 6 cells that we want to transpose, so that we want to turn from a row into a column. And if I now press enter, we see a value error. The reason is that we applied an array formula without typing the right command. The right command for an array formula is not enter after you wrote that formula, it's something different. And the different thing is that if we select that range again, so I'm going to cell A1 where we have the formula, and now select the 6 cells the results should be displayed in, press F2, and now I don't press enter like you do it in a normal formula, but I press Shift, Control and enter. Then we see that it works. Like I said, I'm not going to talk about the details and the background of such array formulas in this video. But you have to know that you can use that transpose formula to turn rows into columns, or vice versa, of course. But you have to be careful that you select all the cells that should contain results in the end, like we did it right here, so those 6 cells. And that you don't press enter, but shift control enter after you typed that formula. Now that we know that, and now that we have a list of the statistics that we want to display, we can go back to our analysis sheet, select cell D1, so the cell with the data list, go back to the data ribbon where we still are, go again to data validation, and now we see that our source data is still here, but we want to change that. So let's select that and delete it. And if we now press onto that arrow right here, let's do that, then you can select the inputs for your data list. So in our case, this would be the statistics list that we just created and the 6 statistics, like that. Now we selected all the values, and if you now press enter once and twice, then you see that nothing changed for the moment, but if you click onto that arrow next to your drop-down list, you can now select the different statistics. Let's select the watch time in minutes, for instance, and double-click right here to increase the column width. And now you can choose the statistic that you want to be displayed, the views, for instance, right here. The only problem is that you can, of course, select those statistics right here, but it does not have an impact at the moment, because nothing is displayed in that column C. So we need a formula that allows us to retrieve the data based on the selected statistic and based on something else. Well, based on this identifier. Because if you go back to our input summary sheet, we see that the identifier allows us to identify each row, and by that, each country and the corresponding period, and that our list that we just created allows us to select the column, so the statistic that should be retrieved. So we need a formula which allows us to combine those two things. So we want to find the identifier and the statistic, and then retrieve the corresponding statistic of that country in that period. Now, let's have a look at a formula that can do something like this. And this is the formula that I'm going to use. It's called index match match. Now, we talked about the index match formula in the previous videos, so I'm not going to explain the details about index match in this video. However, as you can see right here, index match match simply allows us to add a second criteria to our initial match. So this means with index match match, we are able to find our identifier, so the one we just saw in our input summary sheet and in the analysis sheet, as the vertical match, so criteria 1. And we can also add another match, which would be the statistics, so the statistics from the drop-down list we just created, as the second match, that horizontal match, as I call it right here. And in between those two matches, we find the index. This is the result area. And the important thing that you have to remember when we will now create that formula, that the two match types have to build a frame around that index. So remember that structure, because we will recreate that now in Excel. So I'm now in the input summary sheet. This means we have to go back to the analysis sheet. And now we go to cell D2 and write match. We know that already. So we can simply write our match for the identifier. So we want to find that identifier in our input summary sheet in column B. And this is wrong, because we did that with the normal index match formula, so selecting the whole column. But this is not going to work with the index match match formula. You remember that frame I talked about that has to be built by those two matches around the index area. So this is the first frame, the first column match actually. So we cannot select the entire column, but we have to start right here. Because when we select that part, we can then create the second match, and in between those two matches, we will build the index area. Let's see how this works. So I'm selecting B3, press Shift Control and the down key to select all the values that we have in that column. Now we write a comma and make an exact match. This is fine. And now comes the second match. and the second match can simply be added by typing another comma and writing match again, like this. So after pressing tab, we now have to go back to our analysis sheet and select the second lookup value. And this is the drop-down list, because if we refer that second lookup value to that list, then we can select the statistics dynamically, and that's what we want. So I selected that drop-down list, or that cell D1 right here, write a comma, go back to the input summary sheet. Let's scroll up right here. And now comes an important thing I was already talking about. We cannot select only the statistics, because if we do that, our frame that we want to create doesn't work. Because, as I said, we want to build that frame around the index area. And as we started our column right here, we also have to start our second match right there. Because then those two matches build that frame and the index area is in between, as you can see right here. So this is why you have to create that index match that way, to make sure it retrieves the right values, or the right results actually. Now that we selected that, we can write a comma and write a 0 for an exact match again. And well, now we do something we already know. As the formula is called index match, we have to write the index part in front of those two matches. Write index, press tab, and now, as I just showed you, we have to start with our index right here. So this is it. Now we can press Shift, Control and the right arrow key, and Shift, Control and the down arrow key to select the entire index area. Now we write another comma, press Enter once and twice, and we receive 88332 for the views in the United States in the first period. Let's see if this is correct. If we scroll up, and we can find the 88332 views in that cell. So we created the formula correctly. And now the great thing is, if we go back to analysis, if you change that right here from views to likes, this also changes. So we have that dynamic data retrieving option right now. Let's also see if that's the right value, by the way, to make sure that we didn't make a mistake. This seems to be correct. So this is fine. Now we have to do something that you already know. We have to go into the formula and fix the cells, columns or rows to make sure that the references are still correct if we copy that formula down. So the index area, this is something that has to be fixed totally. So rows and columns. So I'm simply pressing F4 right here and right there. The match for the first criteria, so the identifier. Here we have to fix the column to make sure that it remains in column A. For the match lookup array for the first criteria, so the identifier, well, we should fix that completely. And then we can go to the second match. Here we have to match also everything because this shouldn't change. And the same thing is true for the lookup array for that second match, like this. Now we can press enter and go to cell C2, press Ctrl and the down key, go to the right, press Shift Ctrl and the up arrow key, and now press Ctrl down. Now we copied all of our statistics into that column, and we can still select whatever statistics we want to have in that column. So those 4 columns now include all of the information that we need to create that 2 tables that we want. So the first table with the statistics by period and by region, and the second table with the statistics by period and country. Now let's see how we can get the data out of that 4 columns into that 2 tables. So let's first create the tables and call that region. And now we need to find the periods according to the sheet names, of course, to make sure that this will work correctly. And this is January to February. Oh, sorry, February 17. Let me just increase the column width and copy that to the right. Also select that, increase the column width, and call that country, like this. Let's also apply some basic formatting now to make that look a little bit more beautiful. And to change the formats of cells, well, you can go to the home ribbon And in the font area, you find some formatting options that you have. So in this case, I will select the 4 columns right here, change the color of that cell or the theme colors, as you can see right here, to blue maybe, and the font color to white. Make it bold and maybe align that to the right, like this. So this looks better now, I think. And we can do something like this, so blue and white and bold. And simply copy that, select that, press Ctrl Alt V and paste the formats, like this. Now let's press Escape to exit that cells. And now we only need to fill that 2 tables with information. The first information we need is the region right here. And we have that information already in that sheet, so we can simply select the region cell, press Shift, Ctrl and the down key, and copy that to right here. And we can simply press Ctrl Alt V again and paste the values. That's enough. And let's do the same thing for the countries. That's why we copied the country names right here. Simply Shift, Ctrl and the down key, Ctrl Z. Let's go back up here, right here. Select the cell K2 right now, press Ctrl Alt V and paste the values. So we got that? No. We have to remove the duplicates again, of course, because we only want to have each region and each country once. But we learned that already, so we can do that quickly by selecting the entire, by selecting the entire column like this, going to the data ribbon to remove duplicates. We don't want to expand our selection, and press remove duplicates and OK. And we see that we have 7 unique values, which is fine. And now let's do the same thing for the country column right here. Go to data, remove duplicates. We don't want to expand the selection also in this case. Remove duplicates and press OK. And again OK. Now increase that column width. And now we see that we basically have almost everything we need. And the only thing that's missing is the data, of course. But before we do that, let me decrease that column width so that you can see everything I'm writing right here. Let's do it the same, like this maybe. So we don't have any statistics in here at the moment. And to get that statistics into that cells, we have to make sure to meet 2 conditions. The first condition is the region. So we only want to have a value right here if we have the region NA in column C. The second condition is that we only want to have that value also if not only that NA is true, but also if we have the data for the period from January to June 2016. So only if the left, and we know that formula already, 10 characters of that values in here are equal to cell G1. Now I'm going to show you a formula which can do that. And this formula is called sum product. Now, as the name says, the sum product formula actually retrieves the sum of products you define in specific ranges. However, I'm not going to use the sum product formula for that purpose. I'm using it for the purpose I just explained. So basically to calculate a sum based on 2 conditions in our case. And I'm not going to talk about the formula right now. I will just write the formula and then go through the formula step by step together with you, because then you will easily understand why this formula is really great for the thing that we want to do right here. Now let's start writing the formula. As I said, it's called sum product, like this. And here you can see again the original meaning of that formula, so to return the sum of products of corresponding ranges or arrays. But that's somehow what you're going to do, but let me just show you what I mean. So we press tab, and now we have to define the first array. But I'm not going to do this. I'm going to write those 2 dashes. Why am I doing this? Let me show you that in a few seconds. So we wrote the first 2 dashes, make the first bracket, and now we have to define the first range where we can find the first criteria, so the NA. And the range for that is, of course, the whole column C, because in that column C, we should look for that criteria. So if I select now cell C2, press Shift, Control, and the down key, and now write equals, and scroll back up, and now select that NA in cell F2. So what we are basically writing right here is that the formula now simply sees if a row or a cell in that column is equal to NA. That's the only thing you have to know for the moment. Let's go on. Now we can close that bracket, write a comma, and again 2 dashes, and open another bracket. And now we need a left formula. Press tab, because we only want to see if cell G1, so the second criteria, is equal to the left first 10 characters of column A, or of each row in column A actually. And this is why I have to write that left formula. Now select the entire values in column A, like this. Write a comma, define the 10 characters that we want to check, because that's the thing that we have to look for if the first 10 characters are equal. Close that bracket, write another equal, no bracket at the moment. Scroll back up, select cell G1, close that bracket now, write a comma, and now define the range the actual sum should be calculated from. And that's column D. By the way, you cannot see that right, so let's drag that right here. So column D, and again Shift, Control, and the down key. And if we now press enter, and another time enter, we see that we have a sum. And how was this sum calculated? Well, let's take another look at that formula by pressing F2. So the first part, that 2 dashes, that range, and that criteria, simply does nothing more, as I just said, than looking through column C and check if each of the rows, or if actually goes through that row by row, and sees if a row is equal to F2, so to NA. If this is true, and this is the important thing right now, this is set to 1. Why is this term set to 1 then? Well, because of those 2 dashes. Because those 2 dashes simply transform false or true to 0 or 1. So if that first condition is true, so if a cell is equal to NA, then we have a 1 in that part of the formula. Let's go to the second condition. Here we have again those 2 dashes that turn false into a 0 and true into a 1. And we have that left formula. We talked about that, so you know why we are using this. So what happens right here is that we see if the left 10 characters are equal to G1, so to the period in that cell. If that is true, so again, this is displayed as 1. So we have 1 times 1, so this is 1 basically. And if this is true, then we build the sum for all of the rows in our case where this is true. So for each row where we have the match between the column A and the column C, so where both are true, we simply create the sum of the corresponding values in column D. And that's why this is basically a sum if actually. So if those 2 conditions are true, then we create the sum for that statistics. And that's it. And this is why this formula is great in that case, and why the only thing we have to do right now is we have to fix the references again, of course. So let's do this, and we don't want to change the column right here, so we have to fix both. The region, well, this should be able to move down, but not to the right, so we have to fix the column like that. The range for left should be the way it is. G1 should only change in terms of the column, but not in terms of the row. And the view, so the result, should remain in that column also. Now let's press enter. Now we can select that formula, press Shift and the right keys, and Shift and the down keys, press F2 and Control and enter. And now we see that we received, or that we retrieved, our statistics for all of the regions, for all of the periods. Now, one thing we could maybe do as a quick check, we could check if the sum of the views that we have right here is equal to the sum that we have in column D. So we see that 2567190. Let's now select all the values we have right here. 2567190. So this seems to be correct. Let's now go back right here. Select that cell G2. Press Ctrl Z and also paste that to that column or to that cell, so L2. Now this is wrong, but we can simply change that by pressing F2, dragging that NA, so that a region match, and turning it into a country match, and also dragging that region to the country in the initial table where we want to look for the value. Now that we have that, let's press Enter. And we see that this seems to work because we have the 88332, which is the same that we have right here. Now press Shift and the right arrow key, keep Shift hold and scroll down. We are almost there, just a few loops. Here we are. Now press F2, Control Enter again, and we have again the 2567190 that we already know. And by that, we now created our analysis sheet. So this was great. We used some formulas, we created a list, and we can now dynamically retrieve the results as we prefer, like this. And you see that everything updates. Let's maybe change the color of that cell to make clear that this is a cell where you can select something by going back to home and maybe turn that into a gray and create a little border outside and turn that into black also. Now I think it's more clear what we want to do right here. And again, we can select whatever we want and we see that the statistics change. Now this was great, I think, and now it's time to finally create some charts to better visualize what we actually can see right here. So let's create the charts in the next video.